we'll start attaching the tiers together. So how I like to do this part, getting this middle part laid out flat. I've got the seams on the inside, so we've got the good side facing out, seam in there. Lay that out flat. What we want to do is adjust the gathers on this layer until it is going to perfectly fit here. So I've gathered a bit too much, so what I need to do is loosen off some of these gathers to gain that extra length there. So to do that, I find out where I've started my gathers, which is over here. That's the threads that we're pulling on. And starting at the opposite side, I'm just going to slowly and gently run my fingers along and ease some of the gathers back towards the beginning. It does get a little bit messy at this point in terms of lots of loose threads and things. That just happens with both cotton and linen. We still need a little bit more there. Okay, that's looking right to me. So next thing I want to do is mark the centre points on here and the centre points on here. So to do that, I'm going to fold this, put the seams together, and that will give me the centre there and the centre there. And I just put a pin in those points. Then we can put this back so we have the seams at the sides again. I'm going to do the same on this. Obviously a little bit different because we do have all these gathers. So before I mark this, I just like to go along and make sure that the gathers are all sitting relatively evenly. If you've got any clusters, you can spread them out a little bit. If you've got areas that don't have any gathering, you can ease some of the more gathered parts along there. Just being really gentle when you're playing around with the gathers because you don't want to rip one of these stitches. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing with this. Fold it side seam to side seam and go over here and mark the centre there and the centre there. With this pattern there's no front or back. The panels obviously are exactly the same either way, but what I tend to do is whichever way I've ironed the seams, the way that they're facing will be the back. So I'm looking at this piece right now, the front here, because the seams are pointing away from it. Next, I'm going to flip this inside out over the top of this one. And we'll start pinning. Grab that front centre to the front centre. And back centre. This is the middle tier that I'm holding here. This is the lower tier. Put those two middle points together. And side seams together. Then from there, you just want to go around and place a few pins. Okay, we're ready to sew those together. So just a reminder, right now we've got the middle tier and the lower tier. We're going to sew those together. We're now going to sew those two together. So we're sewing the lowest tier onto the centre tier. I like to work with the gathered side facing up. That way you've got a little bit more control over what's happening to your gathers as you're stitching them together. So it doesn't really matter where you start at this point. I'll just choose a side seam. And making sure that your underneath part, this middle tier, is laying nice and flat. You don't want anything puckering up under there. And still sewing with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. We're going to get started. Just a reminder here that we are back to normal stitch length, which I have at 2.5. Okay, so here's a seam that we have just sewn. We can now turn it in the right way. And it's starting to look like a skirt. We want to do exactly what we did to fasten the bottom to the middle. We're now going to fasten the middle to the top tier. So once again, we just want to make sure that our gathers gathered to approximately the same size as that top. And then we're going to mark those side seams once again. Exactly the same as we did in the last section. Once again, overlocking is optional, depending on whether you have one or not. You can zigzag stitch in place of overlocking, or even use pinking shears. But I am overlocking, so at this point I'm going to overlock both of those seams that we've just sewn, those two gathered seams, as well as the top and the hem. So that's 4 places we're going to overlock. Around the bottom, the 2 middle seams, and then around the top. Next we're going to cut the elastic to size and then sew the channel to put the elastic in the waistband. So to do this, you're going to put it around your waist, pull slightly firm to about, depending on how tight you like to wear your skirts, and then allow for an overlap of about 1 to 2 centimetres, and then cut. Now we're going to create the channel which will encase the waistband elastic. So to do this, we want the skirt turned inside out. We want your elastic, pins, an iron, and a ruler or seam gauge. So to determine what size we want the channel to be, first we have to know how wide the elastic is. I'm using 30mm elastic, and and we want to make the channel just slightly bigger than that. So I'm going to fold down all the way around the top 40 millimeters or 4 centimeters. Now what we're going to do is mark the centre back. Similar to how we did it before, put the side seams together. See which way this hem is facing. We'll put a marker in here. I use a different coloured pin. The reason we're doing this is because when we sew, we're going to sew all the way around the skirt, but we want to leave a gap of about 10 centimetres at the centre back. This is where we're going to thread our elastic through once we've sewn this channel. Once again, using your ruler or your seam gauge, you want to work out how wide your elastic is and see where you want your seam to go. So I'm going to put mine just along the edge of this overlocking here, which is going to leave me a channel of about 3.5 centimetres. Don't forget to leave this 10 centimetre gap at the centre back. Next I'm going to thread my elastic through this channel, and I know that my channel is about 5 mil larger than my elastic, which is going to give me a little bit of wiggle room so it's not going to be too tight to pull through. I'm using one of these. I don't even know what these tools are called, but they're for threading elastic. If you don't have one of these, you can use a safety pin. So you just grab one end of the elastic, pull that tight. Then we're going to thread it through, making sure that you're not twisting the elastic as you go. Also keeping an eye on this other end to make sure you don't pull this tail all the way through yet. So we've now got both ends of the elastic sticking out here. This is where we want to overlap. Pin that in place. And I would recommend that at this stage you try on the skirt just to see how it's feeling around your waist before we sew this all up. We're now going to close up that gap where we left to thread the elastic through. I've just pinned so that we've got the elastic fastening at the centre back. I also just put a pin on either side here of where our previous stitch line stops and starts, so that we know where we're stitching to. And if you are planning on putting a label in, I'm putting my little Bridget Elizabeth label in here. Now's the time to pop that in. this part is personal preference, but I like to run a row or two of stitching through the elastic to hold it in place and stop it twisting. To do this, you stretch out your elastic, make sure it's evenly spread, and then you have to hold it tight while you are stitching. So I like to put a couple of pins just around the edge, centre front, side seam, and the other side seam. Now all that's left to do is the hem. So once again, the same way that we did the casing for the waistband, just thread your skirt on, and then we're going to fold up the width of your hem. I'm going to do mine at, let's see, I'm going to do mine at about 4 centimetres. I've chosen this length just because I've got a nice straight line to follow using this gingham, so it just makes it a bit easier. And so same as before, go and iron and pin all the way around.